Welcome to episode 38 of the Ape and Bird NFT show. I do think we've got a little bit of a branding issue at the moment because all of our co-hosts that are coming on at the moment are not necessarily Bored Apes, although I believe my co-host today did have a mutant ape at one point. We're going to get into that, but I have someone that should be very, very familiar to the Web3 space in general, not only in Australia, but globally. Joan Westenberg, aka the Dow Jones Index. Joan, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thanks for the invite, mate. It's good to be here. It is going to be a fun one. I feel like every time you and I have a conversation anywhere, it's always kind of a vibe. So hopefully it translates into the podcast world. I prefer doing this to Twitter Spaces because at least I can actually kind of see someone else on the other end.
Yes. I think we're going to have a good chat today, and really excited to have someone as deep in the space as you are. You are one of the most prolific content creators in the Web3 space. I've said this to you before, both publicly and privately, and you just continue to produce more and more content, which I think is quite inspiring in this bear market. So I did want to start though with something that's relatively not Web3 related, and that is you put out a tweet the other night that said, 8 Mile, the movie with Eminem, the famous movie, is over 20 years old. And I think you said something like, that is disgusting to think about.
Oh, it is. It's deeply offensive to me as a person that we have allowed 20 years to go by just like that. It's not okay. I went down a rabbit hole though. Like, I didn't tweet all this stuff, but I just started looking at all these things that were older than they ought to be. And I was just looking up and I was like, okay, well, Good Charlotte's first album is 24 years old. That's pretty uncomfortable to think about, I will honestly tell you. Yeah, I'm not okay with the passage of time. Like, there's nothing I can do about it specifically. There's nothing anybody in Web3 can do about this because, well, none of us can even solve what the point of Web3 is at the moment. So none of us are going to solve the passage of time. And I really do feel like if time travel was going to be possible, we would have discovered it by now, unless people in the future are so enlightened that they don't want anything to do with us ever. That's my rant about 8 Mile. Look, it's a great movie, great music. It shouldn't be 20 years old. And if you need an excuse to go watch it, make this that excuse.
I agree. And I think someone actually tweeted, it might have been Caroline Bowler, who's the CEO of BTC Markets, something about a sequel. But I think if anything, we would see a sequel, AI generated, right? So that we can still see Eminem in his like 20s or 30s or what. I think he was in his 30s probably in that movie. I have a feeling Eminem might be late 40s, early 50s now. I actually saw him at the MCG a couple of years ago here.
I think he's a bit younger than Blink-182, and Blink-182 are 50.
Yes. It is
another fun fact for you. Yeah.
It's deeply offensive. I agree with you. We are both obviously showing our age to any of our younger listeners out there in the audience. But it is interesting.
I see the tweets. They're like, Frank D. Gods is like 21 years old and look what he's built. You want to back a young founder? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, go back him because I'm in my 30s now and I'm tired and I'm old and every bone in my body hurts and I'm still grinding along, but I don't have the time or the patience for that. I can't deal. I can't deal.
I gotta say, I think my brain is wired very similar to yours in the sense of, like I was even thinking about 2003 is when 50 Cent's album In the Club came out, that iconic music video where he's swinging upside down. And then, even for basketball, for me, like I can think like I'll see like a basketball player and straight away it'll take me to like, that player was like the best player in 2001. And then I'll think about what my life was like in 2001. It's, what it's sort of like. I'm going to make it like the analogy when you're looking for an old photo or a video on your camera roll. And then you sort of like, oh, okay, I'm on 2017, July 2017. And you're sort of scrolling and you're sort of looking at what you did in that month. That is sort of the photographic memory I have when I think about like basketball years or sort of albums of musicians.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. But
for me, I just think about it in terms of like iPhones. Like, what kind of iPhone was I using when that particular thing happened? Was it round edges or square edges? Like, what was that? And if I can remember that, I can remember the whole thing that unlocks it. It's like the only constant in my life.
Well, thank you for sticking with us, audience. As you can obviously tell, we're deep in an NFT bear market right now because we've just spent 5 minutes talking about time travel and old rap albums, etc. But Joan, let's get into our Web3 NFT topics. But before we do, for the maybe four people that are listening that don't actually know your background and sort of what you currently do in quote unquote Web3, do you want to just give a little TLDR for us?
For sure. So I've done a bunch of things in my time. I've been a touring hardcore and punk rock musician. I've been a DJ. I spent a lot of time working as a tech journalist and a writer. And for the past few years, that's really been what I've focused on. In the Web3 space, I've helped launch Chainsaw, which was an Australian Web3 publication. I've written for CointelegraphInc.com, the New York Observer, the San Francisco Chronicle, people like that. I've led communications at MotorDAO for a couple of years. And outside of that, I've recently started a emerging tech music company called 4KTX, which is existing to help artists understand emerging technology so that they don't get overwhelmed by all the platforms that are always springing up, trying to get them to sign up. And I spend a lot of time writing The Index, an indie publication for Web3 that I would eventually like to turn into a bit of a fund. Like you said, I did own Mutant Apes at one point. I owned two of them. I didn't sell when they were worth 40 ETH. I did sell when they were worth 15 ETH because everything crashed and I was pretty broke, I don't mind telling you. And I was on a plane coming back from NFT NYC and I just thought, well, fuck, I just need some liquidity. And these days I mostly just collect one of one kind of NFTs or artistic editions. I did buy my first Ordinals PFP last night in bed after deliberating about it to my patient partner for hours. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Lovely. I do want to loop back on those wonderful times of May and June. I think we both
Mm,
had a Twitter interaction the other day
mm,
about that. So let's carve out some time for maybe a
mm.
5 minute cope session later in the show about those times. But just in general, market overview, we've seen sort of a couple of weeks ago, I think I said, I felt like sentiment for me, at least, that I was observing on Twitter and just the way that I was feeling myself, it was almost felt like at all-time lows, or at least since the, sort of May 2021, when I sort of really started to get really deep in the space. But a lot of good things were happening in May 2021, and I hadn't really felt as low. But I do feel like there's been a general uptick over the last week. We haven't seen all floors pump, but we have seen a few projects in particular that have had a little bit of a pump, being sort of checks, Opepen. I don't never know how to pronounce this, but Only Force or Only One Force. We've also seen a little bit of a pump from generative art, and I think probably the catalyst for that was we saw the first liquidation for Free AC's collection of NFTs that included things like Def Beef and Fidenzas and Squiggles, etc., that went to auction at Sotheby's. And, we've seen just the Chromie Squiggles floor in particular go from about 8.5, I think, from this time when we recorded the show last week, up to about 11.5, 12. So how are you feeling about the market in general, just in terms of sort of the projects and the art collections that we've sort of become accustomed to over the last 12 to 24 months?
I think the market right now is still very much in a holding pattern. Things have been pumping the past week, but nothing new or interesting has been happening outside of Opepen and checks. And I think I'm going to measure, like, I'm going to use as a barometer for how the market is doing. I'm going to be looking at what new projects are coming out that are capturing the imagination versus what existing projects are, resurrecting or recovering their floor price or having their floor price drop. I think the best measure for the health of the market isn't the incumbents. It's the people who are doing new things and coming out with new forms of art. And so, yeah, we're seeing a lot of projects pump, but until we see work beyond Jack Butcher's getting that kind of excited attention that we used to see, I don't think I'm going to say that we're back yet.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's probably my take. The market as a whole, I know sentiment has been down, and it can feel like sentiment is down in the NFT space, sentiment is down in Web3, and so on. But I don't think that's exclusive to Web3. I think globally, socially, culturally, sentiment is down. Do you know what I mean? Like, the only place where there is any kind of balls to the wall excitement going on is AI. And that's causing a whole lot of down sentiment and anxiety for a whole lot of other people. I just think we're in a weird place in the post pandemic slump where nobody's feeling it. Nobody is super happy. Everything is kind of down, and Web3 is just a microcosm of that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable observation. So speaking of new things that excite you, or new things at least that you're trying to keep on your radar, has there been anything over the last sort of week or two that has piqued your interest?
It's such a cliche to say it, but I mean, ordinals, yeah. There is something very interesting about just the level of building that's going on. People are coming up with new things and trying new things within limitations that have not been tested before. And I think that's exciting to me just because it's new stuff to learn every day. And, whether it makes money or not, I don't really care so much about that part of things. But what I do care about is that I'm challenging myself. I've grown quite comfortable with a lot of the chains and the platforms and so on that I've been using and writing about and exploring. And so ordinals are something a little bit dangerous, if that makes sense. And like there's just that sense that, oh God, I could fuck this up really badly. I don't fully know what I'm doing. I'm I'm trying this. Hope I don't press the wrong button, and that's exciting. So definitely some of that. Really interested, I guess, in seeing some of the Apple stuff starting to slowly emerge. I mean, there's AR goggles potentially being announced at the developer conference in a couple of weeks. And in the lead up to that, we're seeing Apple allow things like Axie Infinity onto the App Store for the first time. And so I'm seeing a few threads around Apple-based metaversal things that are getting me a little bit pumped. So yeah, there are definitely things that are interesting.
Awesome. And look, ordinals is actually something that we haven't spoke about on this show quite a lot, and that's probably reflective of me not carving out the necessary time to sort of go down that rabbit hole. And I do know that you have been down that rabbit hole. So just for sort of the benefit of the listeners that maybe are still sort of stuck in the Ethereum ecosystem and haven't really gone outside of it, like how would you sort of explain the differences that you're experiencing sort of testing, all things ordinals versus sort of the Ethereum based NFT community?
Things just are not very glossy yet. Obviously, the tech is massively different. The tech is not even comparable to Ethereum because it just works in such a different way. It's on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's not actually. People talk about the Ordinals protocol. It's not a protocol. It's Ordinals theory. It's inscribing things on sats. All these like complex notions and ideas, but at the very core of it is just this sense of being where ETH NFTs were at in like 2018. I don't know if you were around back then, but things were just so janky, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
We talk about how Web3 isn't very user friendly, but I mean back then that was not user friendly. When we were just like trading crypto kitties and stuff like that, it wasn't a user friendly experience, but there was something very DIY and punk rock about it, and Ordinals feels a bit like that to me now. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that take. And to answer your question, no, I wasn't unfortunately around in 2018. Playing with NFTs in hindsight, I would have loved to be sort of late 2020, early 2021 for me. But I've certainly sort of gone down probably the Ethereum rabbit hole and the historical side of things. I'm a big fan of project called Crypto Arte. I've met the founder Seb. It's one of the first generative art projects on Ethereum in 2018. And obviously you mentioned CryptoKitties and Punks for 2017, and then we had sort of Etheria, and we had Pixel Map and all these type of ones. So even when I look at Pixel Map, that was a 2016 Ethereum project. So like it's an interesting sort of analogy you make there, and it's actually making me excited to think about spending the time to go and learn Ordinals, because I'm sure it would have been beneficial to have some of those early projects in the bag and an Ethereum context in 2018.
Honestly, because I was around in crypto in 2017, 2018, I missed everything that made money. Like that is my superpower. I buy the top of all the shit projects and I miss all the good projects. So if you see me doing something, do not copy trade me. I'm not good at it. I just do things on impulse. So I miss punks. I miss bored apes. I'm not anticipating that I'm going to luck in and pick up the next $1 million thing on ordinals. That just doesn't sound like something that I will do. But I am having a good time. And if you're not having a good time in Web3, why put up with all of the nonsense? You know what I mean? Like if you're not having a good time, you should go do something else.
So are you sure that your alt account is not Steve Aoki? Because you just said you bought all the tops. Like, is
Oh
it?
my god, Steve Aoki. It's so wild how Steve Aoki is now synonymous with Web3 stuff because 10, 15 years ago when I was DJing and playing like house shows and so on, Steve Aoki was the guy who signed Block Party and the guy who ran all the electronic shows and the guy who worked with Bloody Beetroots and stuff like that. And so for me, it's just like, oh, Steve Aoki, yeah, like dance music royalty. And now it's like, no, Steve Aoki, like crypto in joke. It's a weird shift, right?
I wanna ask you one question. This wasn't on our sort of run sheet, but when you mentioned crypto kitties, so I have
Mm,
a little bit of a thesis, and look, it completely could be wrong. And look, I won't say that I came up with it completely by myself. I would say I've probably been influenced a little bit over the last 12 months, particularly by Nate Alex, who, is a dev and sort of in that sort of what I would call that sort of Jimmy.eth, and Nate Alex sort of one of the Doodle founders, like almost like little
mm,
mafia group that started collecting NFTs in 2017. But there's CryptoKitties are hard to navigate, and obviously, they were such a significant NFT collection, similar to Punks, but there's over 2 million of them. If you go on OpenSea, it's very very hard to navigate. Like, there's two
mm.
million, and it's sort of like it's hard to filter. But one of the things I think Nate said over 18 months ago, and I've, in full disclosure, I think I've got a couple sort of in the wallet, is, there's only 34,000, I think it is, generation zero CryptoKitties out of the 2 million. And CryptoKitties actually were the collection that inspired the ERC 721 token standard, if I'm not wrong. So Nate's thesis, which I suppose I'm in some way stealing, is, hey, this is not financial advice, but if NFTs go on to be this sort of like real big thing, like a lot of us expect, and we're getting Netflix docos that are coming out in the next 5, 10 years, sort of talking about the origins of how these NFT collections started and sort of piecing the timelines together. I don't know. My question to you would be, in your mind, is a generation zero crypto kitty, maybe for a historical context, something that maybe is worthwhile for? I think the last time I checked, the floor was like about 0.09 or zero point 0.1.
I guess the answer is going to be, do you like the Generation 1 crypto kitties?
Yeah, I mean, I like, for me personally, like I have no idea what they're going to do, like price wise, right? But for me personally, it's sort of like I feel like I'm I feel like I'm buying something that may have historical value, in the sense of, if people look back and go like, what were the dominant collections that sort of started this new era of digital asset ownership from a non-fungible standpoint. So anyway, it's a thesis that could be completely wrong for me, but regardless of what the floor price does, I just like having a few crypto kitties in my wallet.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I land on stuff is I'm probably not good at telling what's going to be the next big thing or what's going to be worth holding on to because, like I said, I didn't mint Bored Apes on midnight, like I saw the link getting passed around, I just didn't do it. Um, and I think it comes down to ultimately I'm always just going to buy the stuff that I want to buy at any given moment because I like it. Um, so I wouldn't necessarily call myself a NFT trader. I don't really trade them. I just kind of accumulate them because I like them. I mean, you can't see it right now, but all around my office is just like stuff like this, like limited edition vinyl action figures that I think are freaking cool. A lot of them are Bob's Burgers action figures. A lot of them are just like stuff by Todd McFarlane or Alex Pardee and so on. Like, this is stuff that I acquired because I'm really passionate about collecting cool things that bring me joy. And so for me, it comes down to if crypto kitties are going to bring me joy, and some of them do because they're really cute, I'll pick some up, but I probably won't pick them up just for the sake of them being a historical object, because I don't think I'm going to get joy from that. And I certainly won't get joy from selling it, because even if I sell it for a profit, I know that a part of me will always go, what if I sold it for more? So there's not a whole lot of joy down that pathway. And I was having this conversation with my partner last night, actually, because I've been mulling over the purchase of a Bitcoin punk on Ordinals, one of the first major projects minted on Ordinals, which I think probably does have the potential to be a historic project. But at the same time, I love them because they are a derivative. They're not an official collection, and I don't necessarily want to spend $3,000 on a derivative if it's not going to spark that level of passion. So yeah, I think I'm literally just at that stage of buying the things that I like and not buying the things that I think are going to be worth anything, because I think most of them probably won't be if I'm into them.
Yeah, I think it's amazing advice, and I recorded a different podcast that yesterday, it's on Nova podcast. I don't think it's out anymore, and it's sort of more to the normie crowd that's just learning sort of crypto, and it sounds cliche, and it's sort of the same advice you're giving, Joan, is like, when you're getting into NFTs, like if you're just trying to find the next Bored Ape, you're going to literally drive yourself insane. Like, yes, there's going to be outliers that just get lucky, or they're in a certain alpha group and they just, they get lucky through that. But ultimately, like, I know a lot of my wins in NFTs, which, could have been much larger wins, which we'll get back to the cope session in a little bit. But really, like, they were actually bought because of things that I liked, or I just thought were fun, right? Like a digital yacht club during lockdown in Melbourne. We were coming out. This is my Bored Ape story. I've told this on the pod before. I'm like on OpenSea. It's like mid-May. I don't really know much about Bored Ape. I'm not really a presence on crypto Twitter yet, because I was still trying to find out, do I go anon? Do I say docs? Like, what do I do? And so, like, I really hadn't poked my head up, right? I'm just in a few Discords, and I'm like, Bored Ape Yacht Club. I'm like, kind of sounds funny, right? And I was going to the races with my friends on the Saturday, and I honestly just wanted to tell them that I'd bought this thing that's access to a digital yacht club for $1,500. And I got the response that I was expecting. They all laughed and like, oh, you paid, like, you literally paid $1,500 for that picture. And I'm like, yeah. Now, I had no idea what I was about to do, right? But I literally just bought it out of curiosity. And then the other thing was, I wanted to write on the bathroom wall, which was the first piece of Bored Ape utility in there, the swamp, because I hadn't gone through the process yet of like signing into, other than OpenSea, signing into a decentralized app and verifying my token and getting to do something that someone without the NFT couldn't do. And so that was an unlock in my brain where I was like, oh shit, this is going to be like a interesting new way that we're going to use the internet. And so, like, I know people hate it when I tell this story, because they're like, oh yeah, you just got lucky, or you knew what Bored Ape was going to do. And I'm like, no, those two pieces of information I just gave you, literally why I bought, because I wanted the laugh out of friends to say I was in a digital yacht club, and I wanted to write on the bathroom wall of a decentralized app. So, like, again, back to sort of just, and so I got lucky. That's 98% luck, right? So, but yeah, I think it's really sound advice to say, buy things that you like and buy things that make you curious. And, hopefully a few of them do moon, because there's nothing wrong with the floor price going up. I prefer to see that than going down, but sound advice. All right, so let's get on to actually something, speaking of something new and interesting that I did see in the last 24 hours, Joan, but I'm definitely not going to profess to be an expert, but I saw something called Doppelgänger by Patrick Amadon. And this is, I'm just bringing it up right now. Sorry to our listeners that I just sort of fumble around 27 different browsers here. But I believe the context of this is you actually mint an NFT. I believe it's at 1 ETH. And essentially, it's almost like artists will add multiple pieces of artwork forever to this one NFT token. And so there's two interesting points here, Joan. We've obviously been accustomed to buying individual art pieces from artists that are all, whether they're an ERC 115 or 721 or whatever. And this one apparently is incorporating some new tech where you can just constantly add new pieces to the same token. So you're more technical than I am. I know I haven't given you any sort of time to sort of prepare for this one, but I thought it was interesting from two perspectives. Like I said, from the tech perspective, having like almost like this new token standard or variation of token standard, but then also reframing this whole thing of where, you know, you've got 10 different pieces of art from one artist. Now you could have 10 pieces of art from one artist that's all on the same token. So any sort of general thoughts around this? I know, again, knowing that you've just seen this.
Yeah, there's a few people that have been working on something similar for a little while now, and we were even working on something similar at MotorDAO for a bit. The idea is nesting NFTs within an umbrella NFT. And for me and for us, the exciting part of that was, okay, well, what if you do this for a musician and you have the main NFT, which is either an album or a mixtape or a collection, something like that, and you keep minting songs into that, and it becomes like a single NFT holding your entire music collection or an artist's entire output. And that's a really exciting idea because at the moment, it's pretty hard to have a way of minting an album that makes sense in sort of Web3 space. So yeah, nesting NFTs are kind of a cool concept. I haven't looked into the one that you're specifically talking about, but if they are managing to do this well, I think that's quite cool. I think the complexity here is going to be the communication aspect of it, which is telling people, hey, you've got an Ethereum identity that unlocks an Ethereum wallet in which there is an NFT, in which there is an NFT. If you frame it right, that's going to be really easy, but until you frame it right, it won't be. But, you know, I mean, I could definitely see a future where some band or other, for some reason, I'm blanking, and the only band that I can think of is ABBA. Which is weird. No, I'm wearing a used hoodie. Where the used issue an NFT, and then that's the only NFT you ever need to hold, and you get every song they ever make, and they sell that NFT for a premium, and then that's a cool way of doing it. Like, there are a lot of great things that can be unlocked by having nested NFTs working effectively. There might even be some benefits to the way you transfer NFTs via Ethereum and reducing gas costs if you can do it right. I'm not sure. But yeah, cool concept.
Awesome. The other thing that I saw in the last 24 hours was Big Inc. So Big Inc. were behind Goblin Town, which pretty much sort of around this time last year when, you know, prices were crashing, Goblin Town exploded. I think that might have been in the first or second week of June, almost in the lead up to NFT NYC that you and I were both at. I remember the sort of Goblin Town burger trucks that were all at the events and sort of hanging around, etc. But Big Inc. essentially went out to the market, I think a few weeks ago, and I never did it, but a few of my buddies that are down big on Moonbirds, they should have bought front birds because they wouldn't be down bad so much. But they actually put their addresses in, which essentially looked at, you know, how down bad are you with your NFT portfolio and particular individual NFTs, and then you could qualify for this drop that happened in the last 24 hours. I believe it's like some type of like warrants or some type of like almost certificate, which is just it might be like an ERC 1155 at the moment, and then there's going to be a reveal, and then there's going to be certain rarities and scarcity to this new collection. But the TLDR for me, when I sort of had a quick look at some of their video stuff yesterday, was I feel like they get it, right? Like they get internet culture, and I feel like the way that they're playing it in this current bear market, I wouldn't be surprised if we see at least a momentary pump for the next couple of weeks. I know a buddy of mine actually aped about 200 of these things the other night. So again, haven't been down the rabbit hole enough to sort of give any further context than other to say Goblin Town, or the creators of Goblin Town, are back and they're doing something new.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool idea. I know there are some folks who have a bit of a negative view of Goblin Town purely because price went up, number went down kind of thing. But I guess I always thought, look, I mean, they never promised more than what they delivered, and what they delivered well, and I give them props for that. So if they're building something new, then I think that could be a cool thing to get behind. Caveat to that is I bought 6 goblins for like 0.05 ETH each and sold them for 0.6 ETH each, and that was the only reason that I was able to have a roof over my head when everything crashed. So I've got a soft spot for them.
Well, I feel like this is a good segue. Let's talk about the time. Let's not spend too much time on it, because this could get a little bit too copy. But this time last year, pretty much the entire crypto NFT market was absolutely starting to melt down. We had already had Terra Luna. I think Celsius was sort of next, and then we had like 3AC. The Fed in America was starting to hike interest rates. Like ETH was crumbling, Bitcoin was crumbling, floors were crumbling, and your mental health and my mental health was crumbling as well, as we were in America trying to figure out what to do. I remember it was one of the most stressful times I've ever gone through, because I felt like I really didn't have a lot of people to turn to at that stage. And it was the first crypto down cycle that I had ever experienced. I came in 2020 in a bear, but I didn't even know I came in a bear, and I bought a little bit of crypto, and then all of a sudden my NFT portfolio shot out of the gates, and I went, how great's this? Had no plan, no numbers, just sort of like in hopium lands, just, off with the fairies, and then got punched in the mouth excessively for about 2 months straight, and really only made 1 or 2 moves. And, you hear from people that have been in the space, you have to experience it for yourself, right? And it's very difficult. And I just wanted to get your perspective, obviously, because you obviously felt it in those May and June months. And specifically, I do want to ask you, being in crypto a little bit longer than me, was that the worst downturn that you've experienced in your time?
Yeah, look, that was the worst. That was absolutely the worst. I think mostly because this was the first major crash where I had, it was my first post-docs major crash where I'd gone all in. Because prior to that, I was dabbling in crypto. I was doing it all under various aliases, several named after fictional wizards that I will never reveal. So I've been dabbling and so on, but I hadn't really gone all in on it. And when this crash happened, I had gone all in. My agency clients were all Web3, and I was probably doing a lot in the space. And so it hit me harder this time around purely because of that, Whereas in previous kind of like down cycles, it was just, look, it's 10-15% of my net worth. Like, it's kind of play money. That's a bit funny. I'm mostly interested in the nerdy aspects of the tech and supply chains and stuff like that. So in previous cycles, it didn't get to me too much. In this one, it really, really hit me hard. So that was quite rough. And I think a lot of people really revealed their true colors in the aftermath of that crash and the subsequent bear. We've seen people who, I frankly respected, kind of throw away their reputation shilling shit coins and Ponzi's and things like that. And don't get me wrong, shit coins are fun and I trade them, but we've seen some people really just kind of betray their audience and everything about themselves just to survive. And I understand the I guess the impulse to do that because things have been rough for the past 18 months, but it's still been kind of sad to see. So yeah, look, I mean, it didn't change anything about the space for me in the sense that it didn't change or shake my belief in it and what we're doing and what we're building and in the core tenet of Web3 for me, which is that I think it's a better path for creators. And I will always define myself as a creator before anything else. But it did shake my faith in some individual people. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when I talk about or I talk to sort of friends that have very little knowledge of NFTs or Web3 or crypto or whatever, and former colleagues that I spent sort of my time in corporate land before I sort of got red pilled on all things Web3, and there's almost like these parallel universes happening where you've got this game-changing technology that I think both of us share very similar thoughts on, and this whole new wave of like rewarding creators or getting creators the space to actually make a living, and all these different use cases that we know. To your case around music before and what Motordown is doing, there's so many great use cases that are still in their infancy, and but then running parallel to that, we do experience like almost like a casino, right? Like there's whether it's like meme coins or like NFTs that run up, and like it's a highly speculative risk on asset. Having said that, it's not the only speculative asset out. Like it's interesting that my portfolio got punished probably 90 to 95% down. I was probably fortunate that I hadn't put a lot in initially, so it's just sort of trying to more detach from, oh man, what if I sold at that particular time? But my stock portfolio, like I had a very small stock portfolio that I started sort of dabbling in about 2016, 17, just buying various tech stocks, right? They had been punished 90 to 95% as well. So it wasn't just crypto that had that downturn. It was in the traditional stock market too. So I sometimes the counter I hear people say is like, oh yeah, but crypto gets smashed more than anyone else. Well, that can be true, but I can tell you that a lot of my tech stocks were on par in terms of like how damn bad they were. But back to sort of the parallels, it's just this interesting space where you've got a lot of speculators, you've got a lot of people that are trying to make quick money, and cheap money. But then you've got people like, you and I and other people that we associate in the Australian Web3 community. They're actually trying to carve out a quote unquote career or experiment with this new technology, and sort of you're actually, so I do feel when you do have something else other than this speculation, you probably have a slightly more sense of control, but it still hurts when you do, like back to your point around having a lot of your network worth in crypto or NFTs. When those downturns happen, geez, it hurts. But I think probably what we'll all learn is like to be a little bit more balanced next time so that we can sort of like weather the storm in terms of our portfolio allocation. At least that's my sort of take.
Fuck no, I'm going to be all in next time as well, and it's going to hit me all over again. I'm going to do the same thing because learning is for losers. Never learn from your mistakes. Never ever.
Well, that's a hot take. I need
No.
someone to clip that and put it.
Never learn from your mistakes. No, I think it's definitely there's definitely some truth to that. I think I like to describe Web3 as being it's a concentrated microcosm of the rest of the world. Like people point to scams and bad behavior and innovative tech and people on the cutting edge and all this stuff, and they say, looking, it's so obvious that crypto is either good or bad. And I think it's just the case that crypto is full of humans, and those humans exemplify the best and the worst of human behavior on any given day. We have criminals in the ecosystem because there are criminals in society. We have bad actors and good actors because that's just what humans are like. And it happens to be a concentrated ecosystem where we have more of these people in more extremes because the kind of folks who are attracted to Web3 at the moment are people who are more extreme. And I think that's just what you get.
I think that's a very, very reasonable take. Okay, segueing into your creation patterns, I want to ask you, as I said off the top, there's not a day that goes past that I don't have an email from you with something brand new. You're always tweeting, whether it's Twitter Spaces, etc. You've obviously got clients, like you said, with your agency. How do you find time in the day? You're obviously down the rabbit hole on Bitcoin or Ordinals. Like I find like I'm constantly playing catch up, and I'm sure that most people feel the same way. But it just feels like the amount of content that you're able to pump out in a 24-hour day is extraordinary. Talk us through it.
I get up pretty early and I go to bed pretty late. That's the shortest answer. I do get a lot done in my day, but I actually think it's a result of not having a system behind it. I think a lot of the time, one of the biggest blockers to producing a lot of content or doing a lot of things is spending time trying to design and create the perfect system in which to do it. Whereas what I tend to do is just get up, write a list of things that I'm going to get done on a piece of paper or on a random note or on a sticky note or an Apple Notes or sometimes just like on the back of my hand. And then I just do those things and I make sure that I sit down and do them day after day. And so there's no real system. It's just keep track of what you want to do and do it, and don't necessarily worry about perfection, getting things to be exactly right, whatever it is. Just get things done, and if they're done, that's good enough. And so I do that every day. I mean, I've definitely spent time in the past trying to build some kind of productivity system. None of them ever worked for me, and I've spent way too much time on them. So I just do whatever feels good each day in terms of like tools I use, and I just make stuff. And that's not a very useful answer because there's not much that people can learn from that except perhaps spend more time producing and spend less time on productivity tools.
I honestly love that. I feel like I get into that trap often too. It's like, oh wow, Notion brought this out, or this app does this, and it's almost like, okay, all my problems are going to be solved because there's a new SaaS product, and you spend a week experimenting with a new SaaS product and you actually achieve none of your goals, and you're just in the same. So I think the overarching message is do the work, right? Specifically though, how do you deal with, I mean, you've probably given some context earlier in the show around, you will dabble with new NFTs and sort of when you want to, so you prioritize your own content production. But I think a lot of people, me included, might start the day thinking, these are my top 3 goals and this is what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden there's a WhatsApp or a Telegram message from a group chat you're in, or a buddy of yours saying like, hey, Opepen's doing this or whatever. And then all of a sudden that sort of monkey part of your brain takes over. It's like, wow, there could be like some free money here or a new mint or whatever. And all of a sudden 3 hours go by and you've done nothing. How do you avoid FOMO, or how do you negate FOMO like that?
I genuinely don't really get FOMO. Again, not helpful, but there's always going to be another opportunity, and there is always going to be something else that's cool. And so like it doesn't really necessarily matter if I miss the one big thing that everyone's into. I missed Opepen, absolutely missed that. Now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, fuck, that's really cool. When it was really sort of like happening, I wasn't in a good mental space, and so I wasn't paying enough attention to it to get behind it. And so, yeah, I definitely missed that. But there'll be something else that'll come along that I won't miss, and that'll be okay. And other people will miss that, and that'll be okay as well. I think it's just if you really look, if you take a step back and look at it, there are cool things happening, not just in Web3, but all over the place every single day. And we have a finite amount of time, and we can't consume all the cool shit that is out there. If I choose to watch Ted Lasso for an hour in the evening because it's a great show, I am missing out on spending an hour watching another show that I might also really enjoy, but I've chosen the thing that I'm going to enjoy. And that's sort of enough for me. I don't think that's necessarily a result of any form of enlightenment or anything like that. I just think it comes with the kinds of life experiences that I have. Like one of my defining life experiences that I talk about, and I talk pretty openly about this, is that I'm a recovering alcoholic. So I think I've come to just a level of acceptance about things that I can't control that helps me sort of avoid that FOMO, if that makes sense.
It certainly does. And I believe you've put out a book. I minted one. I haven't read it yet, but I minted it.
Thank you.
It's called Friction. Talk us through, just give us a little snapshot of that.
So Friction is a collection of essays about doing life on hard mode, which is really just because I think that a lot of the tools that we have, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying about spending time in productivity tools instead of spending time doing work, we have created a society that's focused on small innovations and easy comforts that just make our lives almost meaningless in the degree of ease that we have. We don't really optimize for anything except apathy anymore, because we're optimizing for a slightly faster video game or a slightly better Netflix experience, or groceries getting to our house 5 minutes faster than if we went down to the shops and got them ourselves, or in the context of the last 6 months, just letting AI do everything for us. And so it's not that I'm anti-technology. I just think that we lose something when we abdicate all of the things that actually make life interesting and textured and varied. We abdicate those to technology. I think that we lose something sort of ourselves in doing that. One of the examples that I give in the book is things like, when you order Uber Eats, you select the option of just leave my food at the door. And so you've gone from multiple experiences where you would have interactions with other humans, going to the shop and getting ingredients, or going to a restaurant and sitting down and having food, or even just greeting somebody at the door when they bring your food. You've successfully removed any of those aspects of human interaction to make your life that much easier, that you don't have to even have the slightest bit of contact with another human being in your day, because you can just get everything just straight to your door and so on. So my thinking with the book is, hey, not all the time, but certainly some of the time, we should choose to do things that are human, that require our full attention, that require us to be entirely present, that ask us to communicate with and interact with other human beings. Because if we just abdicate everything to technology and take a backseat to that kind of behavior, then we lose something of what it means to be human.
I love that. And I feel like I would love to do another show with you at some point where we can almost like talk about different topics like that that are not Web3 related, and just to add my own little flavor on that. I remember like there's certain things that sort of stick with me in terms of, what do they say? Let's sort of like, hard choices, easy life, easy choices, hard life. I also remember something on the Tim Ferriss show many, many years ago. I would say like at least 6, 7 years ago. And it's something that I try to do on a regular basis. There's sometimes that I fall over and stumble and I forget to do it, or I'm just, in my own little selfish world at times. But he had this sort of line where he was like, he started doing an experiment, and it was very simple and basic. It was like, smile first. And I was like, what does that mean, smile first? And the tangible example of that was like going into a cafe, right? And, you might see the person that's serving you, and you're just getting a takeaway coffee, or you might be dining in, whatever it is. And, there's always this sort of like somewhat awkward moment of sort of like, who's going to give in first? Like, are we both going to be sort of like, agitated? Or are we both just like not going to smile? Like, so the idea of smile first is just like, be on the front foot and actually initiate sort of being a good human in the way. And it's like, it's pretty easy to smile first. And I just try to do that, particularly like IRL, interactions, which are getting less, to your point. But I just think, for me, psychologically, if I'm smiling first and trying to initiate a positive interaction with another human, if I get that returned, it almost gives me some energy. And if I don't, then, I tried, and I still feel good about myself because I was trying to sort of bring a light and fun situation to my encounter. And if the other person's having a bad day, then that's not necessarily something I'm going to carry with me for the rest of the day. But yeah, smile first is something that I probably think at least once a week about.
Yeah, I think it's right, because a lot of this stuff, it comes down to what we do that shapes what other people think and feel and how they react and so on. Like we are all connected. I don't want to sound like a fucking hippie because never trust a hippie, but we are all connected in some way. What you do does affect the people around you, so you got to think about it.
Speaking of trust, let's go back to Web3 as we sort of start to wrap up the show. Ledger, Trezor, the two main dominant brands of hardware wallets, have had some very bad press and PR and news over the last, 5 to 7 days, starting with Ledger. I think about this time last week, finding out that potentially this new firmware that they're going to deploy would have the ability to shard the seed phrase into quote unquote trusted third parties. And then Trezor, who have had priors in terms of, I think their Trezor 1 model had been physically hacked, and then essentially, $1 million worth of Bitcoin or something like that was able to be taken from that physical device. Now there's some new news on the Trezor T model, which is the more recent model, that apparently that type of like physical attack, if you actually had that model, could potentially have the same outcome as the Trezor 1. I did see a tweet to say that, that's what the passphrase solves. So for those listeners that are not aware, I'm not actually sure. I'm sure you can do it. I'm actually a Trezor user myself. But I do have Ledger. I actually have both. But can you, Joan, on Ledger, I'm sort of getting off the beaten track here, but can you actually have a passphrase on Ledger as well? I know you can on Trezor. So, you can have like an extra step of security where you've got, your hardware wallet, and then you've got a passphrase as well. Can you do that on Ledger, as far as you're aware?
Sure, to be honest. I don't use either platform.
Okay, what do you use, or you don't want to say?
I'd rather not say specifically,
okay. Yeah.
But put it this way, if you buy a retro computer that is not compatible with modern Wi-Fi, it's a really good place to keep things.
Very, very interesting. I actually have heard this from what I would call OGs in the space, and I think we would bundle you in that category. So appreciate you sharing that. But back to the drama. We know sentiment can shift very, very quickly in crypto and Web3. On a scale of this being a nothing burger to this is pretty damn serious, where do you sort of see this sort of security drama with both Ledger and Trezor?
I'll answer this from a crypto perspective and from a media comms perspective, because that's a lot of what I do with my agency. So I have kind of a perspective on both these things here. From a crypto security perspective, look, nobody should be entirely surprised by this feature set and this firmware update and the possibilities that it presents. There have been folks talking about how this could be possible through Ledger for years now. I don't think that Ledger are planning on, or even will do anything necessarily nefarious with this service. The most dangerous thing that Ledger will do, or might do, is, as they said, provide access to funds and information if subpoenaed by an anti-crypto government. That's something that they have said that they might do. And I think that's probably the biggest security danger from my mind. But with any kind of tech feature, you shouldn't be asking what's the worst thing that this company could do. What you should be asking is, what's the worst thing that a bad actor who gains access to this company's systems could do? Because that's where the real trouble lies. The problem isn't with what Ledger are going to do. The problem we have to be asking is how secure is that system on Ledger's end, and what happens if somebody gets into their system and are able to use whatever this is running on in a negative way. And I'm speaking very carefully here because I don't want to sound like an alarmist, because a lot of people have been very alarmist about this. But I do think that you really have to take into consideration the dangers of hostile actors, either internally at Ledger or externally, who gain access to Ledger, and what they might do with a perfectly reasonable recovery system. And so for me, I would rather never use that kind of stuff. I've been very interested by the product they're building over at Key One, which is a Game Boy game that lets you store crypto information and so on, which is pretty cool. From a crypto and comms perspective, I think a lot of people in Web3 just suck at that. I think they don't actually have people in-house who are good enough at it. They don't know how to hire agencies who are good at it, and they don't know how to do it themselves. And you see that all the time with projects. A lot of the stuff that went wrong with Ledger was all on the comms side. They weren't clear enough in their comms. They weren't clear enough in the tweets and replies they gave to people. There was a tweet about how it had always been possible for Ledger to access your passphrase and so on. Like, that was just, there were some poorly worded comms there because they weren't taking this stuff seriously. And it's the same with when that Doodles blow up happened, because the founder said we're not an NFT project. That's all just bad comms, badly executed by people who don't understand the nuances of language and communication. And so, I don't want to sound like I'm plugging myself here, but for God's sakes, people, like, there is a reason that media and comms is an entire industry, and it's not worth your time to try to do it yourself, because if you fuck it up, it can absolutely destroy your company. So take that shit seriously.
Couldn't agree more. And let's hope that we don't see a tweet from Ledger anytime soon that says floor it and get the fuck out, like we saw with Doodles.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
All right. Last topic on the docket today, Joan. This has been an awesome conversation so far. I believe Blur trait bidding is coming. And look, is this the most groundbreaking thing? No. But the bigger question for me is this potentially going to be a catalyst? And I know we're still pretty deep in this NFT bear and crypto bear in general, but could this potentially be an NFT catalyst for some more fun around NFTs and getting the aesthetics of the NFTs, going back to what we were talking about earlier in the show of buying things you like? I remember one of the things that I loved about, searching on OpenSea for hours was just looking through collections and finding things that resonated with me and that I liked. And in a Blur era, I think for a lot of NFT collections, they have somewhat become shit coins right now with pictures, and everything is a flaw. I'm generalizing here. We have seen a few exceptions. MFers, we still see some hoodie sales, and we still see, crypto punks and Bored Apes. But overall, the Blur era has led to most collections just people just buying flaws and not really caring about traits. So if Blur introduces trait-based biddings, do you think it has the power to shift the narrative back a little bit to the degen market to say, hey, guess what? Aesthetics and traits matter again?
I don't like trait-based trading, because I actually find that trait-based trading means that people care more about the metadata than they do about the actual art attached to the metadata. And I think that's a dangerous thing, because what you're essentially doing is saying that the art that accompanies the token is inconsequential. What matters is the stuff that is written down about the art. that accompanies the token. I think that's quite a dangerous path to go down. Ultimately, I think Blur introducing trait-based bidding is going to change that. I think all it's going to do is introduce levels of granularity to the fungibility of NFTs traded on Blur. I.e., what's the floor on X trait versus people buying a trait because they like it. I think most of the actions that Blur have taken do not show any passion or joy for the NFT ecosystem. They purely show a vested interest in NFT trading. Specifically NFT trading, not art trading, not collectible trading, not PFP trading, just the trading of raw tokens.
Yeah.
Whether it's Blur lending or trade-based bidding, whatever they do, you can guarantee that it will always be done in a way that benefits the traders rather than the people who are creating the work or the people who are passionate about the work. And so I definitely do not see trait-based bidding as being a massively harmful thing. I can't think of a way that's going to be like an evil iteration of the platform, but I also can't see many positives because Blur has shown time and again exactly where their interests and loyalties lie. And it's for
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end. Our usual disclaimer, this is not financial advice. It never is. This show is for information and educational purposes only. Joan, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. It's been an awesome conversation. Love to have you back in a future episode. Tell everybody, where can they find you on Twitter for your spicy tweets and informative tweets? What's your handle?
Absolutely. So I am at Joan Westenberg. I am very much doxed, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. Go and follow me there and check out what I'm up to.
Lovely. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you back next week.